Let's talk about why to not give up too early. Now, I want to begin by contextualizing this a little bit because it probably sounds really obvious. This is quite literally a cliche. You've heard it all your life. But I think it's because people think about it the wrong way. And the reason why I'm focusing on the same reason as yesterday's video about the ums, uhs, and likes is because for me, I've always found having an understanding of why I should consider advice important for me to follow it. Like when I was a little kid and I heard from a teacher to not run with scissors, the first thing my brain wanted to do, and granted I was a child, was maybe to run with scissors because why? Now, if instead of saying don't run with scissors, someone had told me, well, you might fall, as you might fall at any given time, especially if you're running, and then you could seriously hurt yourself or someone else if you had scissors in your hands. Okay, now that you've given me that information, I would come up with the same rule and tell myself, don't run with scissors because I don't want to hurt myself or someone else. And so for me, it's so important to understand that why. So just like yesterday with our looking at the why, we say and like. Today we're talking about why it's so important to not give up early. And what I had first assumed about this, before I kind of had more firsthand experience through it, was it kind of came down to like, almost as if each time I'm trying, I'm rolling dice, right? To hope that it works out this time. That if I stick to it long enough, maybe I'll find out that I am good at this thing, or that it can work out for me. As though it's simply a matter of keep trying at it because who knows, every time is a fresh chance. When that's really not what's going on. Not in the least. The reason why it's so important to not give up too early is in large part because when you're new to something, you're making all kinds of mistakes, all kinds of errors, all kinds of beginner problems, flaws in what you're doing. And what's happening is you're feeling not good at it because you're making all those mistakes and all those errors. Now, the reality is, of course, everybody makes those or related or similar kinds of errors when they're new to something. And the people who stick around with it are the ones who, because they've made those errors before, don't make those errors again. Right? When I'm helping clients in private training or in my club or online in my video courses, otherwise with game development, the reason why I'm able to immediately see their problem, offer several solutions, pros and cons of different pathways, isn't because I can predict the future, isn't because I'm smart. It's because I've released over 100 games, I've prototyped over 200, I've advised on nearly 300, and that's why, because of all those errors that I've accumulated, I can help steer others clear of those from at least being able to be like, oh, here's what happened last time we did things that way. Here was the downsides to that. Here was different ways we've approached it, and like I say, weigh the differences between them. But that comes from having made a bunch of mistakes. And all the time, whether it is seeing how people try to kick off, doing some website design stuff, learning a new programming language, picking up a new hobby or habit, taking an interest in a subject, when they quit too early, again, what's happening is they're feeling that resistance of all those beginner errors, but not sticking around long enough for having got on the other side of those beginner errors to pay off. Because as soon as someone has worked out those awkward first stages, those mess ups, right? I mean, my first game development training business was 2009. I don't even want to say the name of it, it's so embarrassing. The name that's more public now was like 2 or 3 iterations later. The first name, sad. But, I learned a lot of things from doing that enabled me to do the things I'm doing now in a way that impacts many more people's lives, gets much better results for far more people. But it came from the fact that when I had that knowledge behind me of what didn't work, I didn't just say, okay, therefore I'm not going to be able to run a game development training business. I said, okay, well, that's why I have at least one really clear example to draw upon of challenges, opportunities, and so on that gave me a better foundation to build on than somebody else. The same thing actually happens out in the Bay Area in general with Silicon Valley's entrepreneurs. Of quite often, entrepreneurs who get funded, startups that have backing, are often a number of people involved in them who come from failed ventures because the capitalists who are looking to invest in those opportunities know that there are people who aren't going to make those same set of mistakes again. There's a kind of old famous tale, I can't remember which president it's for, it's reused so much in the success literature that details are almost irrelevant at this point, but there is a president who had a really rocky landing with a pilot, a small aircraft, probably an earlier Air Force One, essentially. And the kind of rocky landing, the pilot was terrified he was going to be fired over. And then the president at the time had basically told him, well, you know, now he feels most comfortable with this pilot because he knows he's going to go train himself up. He's going to go prepare himself to whatever he has to do to make sure it doesn't happen again. That the odds are lower of it happening again from that particular person than of someone new who hasn't yet been through that level of stress and that kind of mistake. And so when you're making mistakes with stuff, when you're feeling grappling at uncertainties and confusion, doing things that it just doesn't make sense to you. I mean, there's kind of a caveat next to this we'll go to in a second. But again, that's why you being on the other side of that's going to be a huge leg up and advantage over other people who haven't. And that the longer you stick to it, the more errors you keep making, the more you get those behind you. It's not just like it's a fresh chance each time. It's legitimately giving you a chance to not make the same mistakes other new people are going to make. You're on the other side of that inherent barrier to entry that is beginner errors. But if you look back from that point in time, all you see is, I've been making a lot of mistakes. If you could look forward, you would see, those are a bunch of mistakes I'm not going to make again. And that's your advantage to not giving up too early. Now again, sort of the one caveat is to make sure that you are not just plateauing by continuing to do the same thing without reflection, without taking a moment of pause every now and then to re-strategize about what's working or what isn't, to not proactively seek feedback or accept feedback and so on, depending on your objectives. Of course, that can make a big difference as to the pace at which those beginner errors are getting behind you. Or the other thing is, of course, if you're, and this is where, like in our club training approach or whatever, we try to aggressively steer people towards make those beginner errors earlier. Since the whole point is to get on the other side of it, rather than trying to ignore them or avoid them, let yourself make those mistakes in a safe environment so you can learn from it, get on the other side of it faster, rather than trying to steer clear of every little thing without really gaining a first-hand experience or knowledge of what can go wrong, how does it happen. This is kind of our part of our approach to things. Anyway, that's again kind of my little short spiel today on why it's important to not give up early. I hope that you find it applicable to whatever it is you're up to, whether you're trying to write a book and going through multiple drafts, something I've been working on out here for my latest book, whether you're working on doing YouTube videos, you know, starting a podcast, etc., that it can kind of feel like you're stumbling and faltering, and that's why the more you stick to it, you're going to have a big advantage going forward that you didn't have in the past. You got to focus on that, and it's only going to happen if you don't give up on things early, because the other thing that happens, we see a bunch of those people in our generation, because of all the great learning resources around us on the internet, is that they'll hop around, never getting past beginner level at anything, because each thing they get to some beginner errors from, decide from that they're not good at it, quit too early, and go to something else. This is why it's so important not to get stuck in all that thrashing. That's it for the day. Thanks always for tuning in. Have another video for y'all tomorrow. Bye for now.